The spoon clattered too loud against the bowl, and that's when I knew she was doing it on purpose. Jordan sat across from me, picking at the stew with theatrical disgust, her lip curled as if the smell alone had personally offended her. My son Miles avoided my eyes, stirring his untouched food with the kind of focus people fake when they're hoping not to be noticed. "Did you use a seasoning packet, Gerald?" she asked sweetly, twisting my name like it was a joke. "It tastes like 1962 in here." I gave a soft chuckle, but it didn't reach my chest. "It's my wife's recipe," I said, glancing at the framed photo of Eleanor that still sat beside the microwave, as it had for 15 years since her passing. She called it Sunday stew. Jordan sniffed. Real nostalgic. That was her way of ending things, a snide comment wrapped in sugar. Conversation moved on, and I sat quietly, nodding when spoken to. I was still a guest in what used to be my kitchen. Ever since Eleanor passed, Miles had grown thinner. Not just in frame, though that was true too. He'd traded his wide smile for measured silences, but Jordan had gotten louder. The kind of woman who bought vinegar cleaners in bulk and smiled at funerals like she was keeping score. They insisted I move in with them after my hip surgery. "It'll be easier," they said. "Temporary," they said. But 6 months turned into 2 years, and my little house on Martin Luther King Boulevard stayed empty, its curtains drawn like eyelids. Jordan cooked most nights, meal kits, things with foam and garnish and instructions on her tablet. "We're modern now," she'd say, as if I'd been carving dinner out of bark. The stew was my small rebellion, cooked on a quiet Thursday while they were out. Carrots, beef shank, thyme from Eleanor's old garden. It smelled like 1983, like one long Sunday when the kids were young and Eleanor danced to Al Green in her socks, but Jordan hated it. He made a brown thing, she announced to her mother on the phone that night. "Like food from an era before taste buds." I laughed because it was easier. Because if I didn't, I'd say something sharp and real and there'd be no taking it back. Later, as I washed the dishes, I realized I was humming. Eleanor's tune, the one she always whistled while drying plates, not a song you'd find on the radio, just a meandering thing with no end. "You don't have to do that," Miles mumbled behind me. "Jordan says you should rest more." I turned the water off. "Jordan says a lot." He winced. "She's just trying." "At what?" He didn't answer, just scratched his neck and backed out of the room like a man who'd lost something he never owned in the first place. That night, I sat outside on the patio, watching the tall pines sway in the dark. The Florida heat clung to me like old grief. Somewhere down the block, someone was grilling. The smell hit me like memory, charcoal, hickory, fat-hitting flame. I closed my eyes and tasted it in my mouth. Not the stew, not Jordan's basil sorbet, just meat, smoke, and fire. Real food. Something stirred then, small, like a match in a bottle. I remembered my old Weber grill rusting in the shed behind my house. I remembered the way Eleanor used to say, "You missed your calling, Gerald Meeks. Should have been feeding people for a living." I remembered the block parties, the way neighbors used to peek over the fence when the smoke got sweet, asking, "Mr. Meeks, you making that peach-glazed brisket again?" I hadn't cooked for anyone but my own family in years, but I used to love it. "I used to love it," I whispered, the words tasting strange in the night air, then louder, as if daring the dark to talk back. "I used to love it." And just like that, the match inside me flared. It burned slow at first, not ambition, not yet, just the quiet ache of something forgotten. The next morning I drove out to the old house. I still had a key. The lock turned stiffly, like a throat unused to speaking, and the door gave with a groan. Dust covered the floors in soft films, and cobwebs hung like lace in the corners, but the air smelled the same, a little stale, a little warm, and underneath it all, the faintest memory of cumin and smoke. In the backyard, past the overgrown hydrangeas and the rusted wind chime Eleanor bought in Savannah, the shed stood stubborn and squat. I hadn't been inside it in over 3 years. The grill was there beneath a tarp half chewed by time and possums. Its lid creaked when I lifted it, and a wasp's nest fell from the side. But the bones were good, heavy cast iron, legs still strong. The grate had rusted in parts, but nothing a wire brush couldn't fix. I found Eleanor's old apron folded in a storage bin, navy, with little white tomatoes along the trim. I held it for a long while, not to remember, but to feel her faith in me again. The way she'd always believed I had a gift, not flashy, not trained, just the kind of food that made people exhale when they ate. Back home that night, I scrubbed the grill in the garage while Miles and Jordan watched TV upstairs. It felt like sneaking out, my own little rebellion, though I wasn't sure what I was rebelling against yet. Being ignored, maybe, being reduced. The steel scraped clean under my hands, and with each patch of bare metal that showed through, something else scraped clean inside me. By the time it gleamed again, I was sweating and grinning like a boy restoring a bike, not a man. Nearing 76 with an aching hip and a borrowed bedroom. I didn't tell Miles. Instead, over the next week, I came and went at odd hours. I took the Ford out early, visited farmers' markets on the outskirts of town where the tomatoes still came with dirt and the butchers still wrapped meat in thick paper. I started jotting recipes on yellow pads, not Eleanor's, not exactly, but inspired by her, filtered through time and hunger. One afternoon, I drove downtown and stood in line at the Tallahassee food truck park, watching the crowd. 20-somethings with tattoos, office workers in rumpled ties, mothers with strollers. They lined up for kimchi tacos and Vietnamese iced coffee, for vegan shawarma and fried catfish on waffles. I didn't feel out of place. I felt hungry. That night, I Googled permits, scribbled ideas for names, even sketched a logo, a tomato and a flame, nothing fancy. Jordan walked into the garage once while I was seasoning the grill. She sniffed. "Is that what that smell is?" she asked. "I thought something died in here." I smiled politely. "Just cleaning it up. Thought I'd barbecue this weekend." She gave a mock gasp. "Oh, how nostalgic." I waited until she left before I laughed, not out of bitterness, but something closer to defiance. The next morning I called Mabel Chung. Mabel and I went to high school together, different years, but we'd reconnected years back when Eleanor helped organize a community cookbook. Mabel now ran the Saturday Farmers Market on Gaines Street, and I remembered her saying once, "Gerald, if you ever decide to sell that stew of yours, I'll clear a space for you faster than you can blink." I left a message. An hour later, she called back. "Gerald Meeks," she said, her voice full of surprise and something else. "Hope, maybe. Is the world finally ready for your stew?" "Maybe," I said, my hand steady for the first time in months. "But I know I am." Mabel's voice had a lilt of disbelief, like she couldn't decide if I was joking or waking up from a long sleep. "Gerald," she said, "don't tease me. You're actually doing this?" "I've got the grill," I replied, "and I've got the recipe. That's more than I've had in a long while." She let out a warm laugh. "You bring that stew and whatever else you've got cooking, and I'll find you a corner spot. First Saturday of next month. That give you enough time?" I looked around the garage. The grill gleamed under the single overhead bulb. My notes were scattered across the workbench. "Yeah," I said, slower now. "Yeah, that's plenty." Hanging up, I just stood there, hands still on the receiver. For a few seconds the silence felt different. It didn't hum with loneliness. It buzzed with purpose. I didn't tell Miles. I didn't tell Jordan. I drove out to the county clerk's office the next day and filed the paperwork for a sole proprietorship. Meeks on Maine, I wrote on the form. It sounded solid, honest, like something my father might have trusted. By the time I got home, I had a checklist in my mind. Get a food handler's license, buy a canopy, find a used food cart or build a service counter from scratch, rent a truck, something simple but clean. The puzzle came together with surprising speed, like it had been waiting years for me to finally open the box. One morning, while Jordan took a Zoom call and Miles was out playing racquetball, I packed up my ingredients and went to the house on Martin Luther King Belvedere. The water still ran. The stove still lit. I scrubbed the kitchen from top to bottom until the tiles shone like pearl, and then I cooked. Not just stew, though that was the headliner. I made thick cornbread with rosemary and sharp cheddar. I marinated chicken thighs in orange juice and black pepper, just like Eleanor used to when we had guests over for Labor Day. I tried a batch of pickled green beans with red chili and garlic, something new but bright, something that punched back. I spent the week testing, adjusting, writing everything down in a small leather notebook Eleanor once gave me for anniversaries. It still smelled faintly of her dresser drawer, talcum and thyme. But the stew didn't need changing. It held, the way some things do when they're born of love. The Saturday before the market debut, I was sitting on the back porch with a folding table full of containers, practicing plating, trying different spoons, seeing what looked best in the eco-friendly bowls I bought in bulk. The afternoon sun was soft on the grass. Cicadas hummed. I hadn't felt so tired and so alive in the same breath since Eleanor was still humming beside me. That's when I heard the voice. "You doing catering now, old man?" I turned slowly. Jordan stood at the edge of the backyard, one eyebrow raised like she was stepping into a sitcom set. She had a smoothie in one hand, sunglasses in the other, and her tone was all mockery with a side of disbelief. "No," I said, standing straighter. "Just getting ready for the market." She blinked. "The market?" "Gaines Street. Babel gave me a slot." Jordan laughed once, short and sharp. "You're serious?" "I am." Her eyes traveled over the bowls, the ladles, the signs I'd hand-lettered. "You really think people want this stuff? Stew and cornbread. No offense, Gerald, but this isn't 1950. I looked her dead in the eye. "No, it's not. But it's good food. And it's mine." She didn't respond. Just stared at me like she'd never seen me before, and maybe she hadn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't looking for approval. I didn't sleep the night before launch. It wasn't fear. It was something closer to alertness, a low hum under the skin. Like my body had remembered some old instinct of readiness. I lay in the dark, watching the ceiling fan spin shadows on the wall, counting out the hours like a soldier before deployment. At 4:30 a.m., I was up. By 5, I was already at the house where everything was packed and ready. I'd loaded the cooler with stew I'd made the day before, sealed tight in heat-proof containers. Cornbread was stacked in parchment. Pickled beans glistened in their jars. The truck, borrowed from a mechanic friend who owed me a favor, waited out front like a workhorse. I wore clean slacks, a white button-up, and Eleanor's apron. The tomatoes along the trim looked brighter in the morning light. By 7, I was at Gaines Street, backing into my assigned spot under the live oaks. Mabel was already setting up her tent, giving orders in her sharp, no-nonsense tone. When she saw me, her face broke into something rare, an unguarded smile. "Look at you," she said, hands on hips, sharp as a tack. "I brought extra stew just in case." She nodded toward the growing line of vendors. "You might need it." By 8, the first customers were drifting in, sleepy-eyed college kids, yoga moms with iced coffees, old couples who came early to beat the heat. I laid out my chalkboard menu and watched. At 8:17, a woman approached, middle-aged, thick glasses, ball cap. She pointed at the sign. "What's Sunday stew?" "Beef, carrot, potato, tomato, cooked slow with thyme and a touch of vinegar," I said. "It's an old family recipe." She nodded slowly. "Give me a bowl." I ladled it carefully, handed it over with a wedge of cornbread. She stepped aside, tasted it. Her eyes widened. Then she nodded again, slower this time. "That's real good." She brought back 2 friends 5 minutes later. Word started to spread. Not loudly, no fanfare, no social media buzz. Just steady, like water seeping into dry earth. A man in a tie asked if I catered. A pair of tourists asked where my restaurant was. A local food blogger, I recognized her from the paper, jotted down notes as she chewed through her second helping. By 10, I had a line, and in that line, wearing sunglasses and tight-lipped irritation, was Jordan. I saw her before she saw me. She stood stiffly, arms crossed, flanked by a friend in athleisure. When she reached the front, she pulled her glasses down and gave me a smile so fake it could have melted in the sun. "Well, Gerald, looks like you've got fans." "I do," I said, ladling stew into a bowl. "You here to try some?" "I'm here because your little side hustle is causing a stir. Someone said there was an old man cooking like it was the Depression. I had to see for myself." I handed her the bowl. "Careful, it's hot." She took it reluctantly, sniffed. Her face didn't give much away, a flicker of surprise maybe, or annoyance at being impressed. She took a bite, then another. Her friend blinked. "This is better than I expected," Jordan said. "Good," I replied. "You want to try the pickled beans?" She paused. "You actually sell those?" "They're popular." Jordan glanced at the line behind her, at the quiet satisfaction on the faces of people eating on benches nearby. It was the kind of silence you only heard after good food. No phones, no chatter, just chewing and breathing. "You really might be on to something," she muttered, almost to herself. "I know," I said, but I didn't say it with arrogance. I said it like a man who'd finally recognized his own reflection after years of fogged-up mirrors. The market stayed busy till afternoon. By 1:15 I was scraping the last spoonfuls from the pot, and the cornbread was gone. A woman with a stroller asked if I'd be back next Saturday. When I said yes, she beamed like I'd promised her a new holiday. Packing up took less time than I thought. The exhaustion didn't hit until I sat in the truck, windows down, hands on the wheel, the air thick with the smell of smoke and spices still clinging to my sleeves. My knees ached, my shoulders were stiff, but beneath it all, a hum, not nerves, not tension, something steady. I didn't drive home. I drove back to the house. The house wasn't much, not anymore. Weeds clung to the edges. The paint peeled like old sunburn. But inside, the walls remembered. Eleanor's photo still sat in the same spot. I touched the frame as I passed. In the living room, I sat on the edge of the old couch and exhaled. My feet ached. My chest didn't. Then the door opened. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Miles. He had a way of opening doors like he wasn't sure he belonged in the room, Jordan told me, he said, closing it behind him. "About the food truck thing." "It's not a truck," I said. "Not yet." "Just a stall at the market." He nodded, slowly. "She said you had a line. Almost ran out of stew." He stepped into the living room, glanced at the table. "You're serious about this?" I looked at him then. Really looked. His face still had the softness of the boy I raised, but there was something brittle behind the eyes. A man stretched thin, trying not to snap. "I'm not playing house, Miles," I said. "I'm doing something real, and I don't need permission." He sat across from me. Silence stretched between us like a rope neither of us wanted to pull too hard. "It's just," he started, then stopped. "What? You never told me any of this. You never said you wanted to cook again. Did you ever ask?" That landed harder than I intended. He looked down, fingers tapping on his knee. "I thought you were fine," he said. "You never complained." "That's the thing, son. I stopped talking because no one was listening. Because every time I said something, Jordan rolled her eyes or changed the subject, and you looked away." He winced. "I didn't mean to." "I know," I said, softer now. "I know you didn't, but I meant what I said. This stew, this market, it's not a hobby. It's mine." He nodded, slowly, thoughtfully. "You're not coming back, are you?" I looked around the house, at the window where Eleanor used to watch the mailman, at the chair I'd sat in every Christmas morning, at the ghost of who I used to be. "No," I said. "Not in the same way." He stood up, unsure whether to hug or shake my hand or just leave. In the end, he did none of those things. He looked at me like he was trying to memorize something he'd never noticed before. "Jordan won't like this," he said. "I'm not cooking for her," I replied. He nodded once, then left without another word. And I sat there alone in a house that finally felt like mine again. The quiet felt earned this time, not like absence, not like loss, more like the hush after a storm when everything's still standing. I stayed up that night. sitting in the same chair where Eleanor used to knit, sipping tea that had gone cold while I watched the porch light flicker against the hedge. No one called. No one needed me. And for once, that didn't feel like failure. It felt like breathing space. The next morning, I made breakfast just for me. Eggs over easy, toast with peach jam, coffee from the old percolator. Eleanor insisted on keeping long after everyone else bought Keurigs. I ate by the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood stir. A dog barked. A child biked past too fast. Life, ordinary and uninterrupted. Around 9, I heard a knock. Mabel stood on the porch, wearing her usual sun visor and a smirk. "I brought reinforcements," she said, waving a folded lawn chair like a flag. Behind her stood a woman with tightly braided hair, aviator sunglasses, and the kind of confidence that didn't need volume. "This is Aisha Barnes," Mabel said. "Food critic. Local paper. She's been hearing things." Aisha stepped forward, extending her hand. "You're Gerald Meeks." "I suppose I am." "She said you were good," Aisha said, nodding at Mabel. "I said I'd believe it when I tasted it." I raised an eyebrow. "Well, I don't have a menu prepared, but I've got leftovers and pride." They laughed. Aisha followed me to the kitchen. I served up a warm bowl of the Sunday stew, added a fresh slice of cornbread from the new batch I'd baked that morning out of instinct more than plan. She took a bite. Didn't speak. Just closed her eyes, chewed, then set her spoon down. "That's dangerous," she said. I blinked. Dangerous? Because I was about to write you off as another nostalgia act, some grandpa clinging to beef and potatoes. But this, she gestured with her spoon, this is real. Clean flavors, balanced, honest. You're not copying the past, you're honoring it. Mabel let out a triumphant ha from the living room. "I'm not interested in a puff piece," Aisha continued. "But if you're serious, if you're building something, I'll write about it. Just don't disappear in 6 weeks." "I won't," I said, and I meant it. By Thursday, the column hit the local section. Old hands, new fire. Why Gerald Meeks's stew is stirring up Tallahassee. Jordan didn't say a word. But I noticed Miles left a copy of the paper folded open on the kitchen counter when I stopped by to pick up some tools. He'd circled Aisha's quote in pencil. The second Saturday at the market, I had a line before I even opened. People asked about Eleanor. A man asked for a photo. A couple from Pensacola said they'd driven an hour just to taste the stew that made the food critic cry. I didn't know if Aisha had really cried, but she came back the following week and brought her cousin. That same afternoon, a vendor named Ricky from the tamale stand leaned over during the lull and said, "You thinking about upgrading? You're cooking like a man who's got wheels in his future." He wasn't wrong. That night, I went home and dug out the little leather notebook. I turned past the stew page, past the pickled beans. I wrote 2 words at the top of a fresh page, "Mobile Kitchen," because something was shifting. This wasn't just about proving Jordan wrong anymore. It wasn't even about reclaiming who I was. It was about becoming something new. But sometimes becoming something new means leaving something behind, or someone. The third Saturday came hotter than the last, the kind of Florida heat that curled the corners of signs and slowed people's steps. Even the cicadas sounded lazy. I arrived early to set up, sweat already running down my spine as I pulled the cooler from the truck. I had a rhythm now. First the canopy, then the folding tables, then the chalkboard menu. Eleanor would have called charming in its crookedness. Everything had its place, and for once, so did I. By 9 a.m., the line had formed. That was the morning Jordan showed up again, not as a bystander, not even as a critic. This time, she wore her best boutique sunglasses and a linen jumpsuit like she was scouting investment property. She didn't get in line. She stood to the side, near the tree, watching me serve a family of 4 who asked for extra cornbread, just like last week. She waited until the lull came, then stepped forward. "Gerald?" she said, not smiling. "Jordan. I hear you're making a name for yourself." "I'm just cooking stew." She tilted her head. "That's not what Aisha Barnes said. I can't control what people write. You could include us in this, make it a family thing." I stopped ladling. "What does that mean?" It means Miles and I were talking. There's a path here, a brand. You know, nostalgia, southern comfort, old school roots. People eat that up. You got the face for it. I raised an eyebrow. The face? You know, wholesome, grandpa-ish, trustworthy. I set the ladle down. Jordan, this isn't a campaign, it's food. Exactly, she said, warming now. But food is business. We could find you investors. Build a real truck. Not just a table under a tree. I leaned forward. Why now? She hesitated, just for a second. Because people are listening, and because you're part of our family. We want to support you. I studied her face. Every angle practiced, every word rehearsed. She didn't come to congratulate me. She came to acquire me. No, I said. Excuse me? I said, no, I'm not a face, I'm not a mascot, and I'm not building anything for you to package and sell. Her jaw tightened. That's short-sighted. That's mine to decide. I could feel eyes on us. Not many. Just enough to know this wasn't going to vanish quietly. You'd really shut us out like this? She said, voice low but sharp. After we took you in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You didn't take me in. You tolerated me. Barely. She opened her mouth, closed it. For a moment she looked like the wind had been knocked out of her. Then her spine stiffened. You'll regret this, she said. I smiled, not smug, not cruel, just certain. I won't. And then she turned, heels clicking against the sidewalk, vanishing into the heat. I served the next customer with steady hands. That night, I sat on the porch with my notebook. The word mobile kitchen stared back at me like a dare. I wrote under it, talk to Ricky, price used trailers, design menu board, find Eleanor's peach glaze recipe. The sky faded from orange to slate, and I stayed there until the porch light came on automatically, buzzing against the dusk. Jordan wouldn't be the last obstacle, I knew that. But the real confrontation had already happened, not with her, with myself. The next day, I moved back into the house for good. I'd been living in between, spending my days there, my nights back at Miles and Jordan's, pretending the arrangements still made sense. But after that Saturday, the pretending cracked. I packed my things in the quiet, folded clothes that hadn't smelled like home in years, and left a note on the kitchen table. Thank you for the roof. I've found my feet again. I left the key beside it. The first night back, the silence wasn't heavy. It was clean. The bed creaked differently, like it was adjusting to my weight after too long. The air carried the faintest trace of time from the kitchen. I slept straight through till sunrise, no dreams, no waking. The mornings took on new rhythm. I brewed coffee in the percolator, left the back door open while I sliced peaches or rolled biscuit dough. I set up a folding table in the dining room and used it for recipe notes and sketches for the food truck layout. Ricky helped me find a used trailer, not flashy, but solid bones, clean lines, and enough room for a full flat top and prep station. I named it Sunday's Best, not after the stew, but after the feeling. Mabel helped me secure a permit for mobile vending. Aisha put in a word with a local artisan fair. Suddenly, Saturdays weren't enough. I had bookings on Thursdays, sometimes even private calls for small events, a wedding rehearsal dinner, a retirement party. People remembered the name. People asked for me. It didn't feel like success the way the world sells it. There was no spotlight, no big payout, but it felt full. Every shift ended with tired hands and a full heart. I'd come home and eat leftovers on the porch, watching the sky lean into dusk. One Friday evening, I pulled into the driveway after a catering gig, aprons still stained from brisket and butter beans. As I opened the door, someone called out from the sidewalk, "Mr. Meeks?" A young woman stood near the gate, holding a tote bag and a stack of notebooks. Her eyes were familiar, hazel and wide, like someone I hadn't seen in years. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping closer. "Do I know you?" She smiled nervously. "You might not remember me. I'm Naomi, your granddaughter." I hadn't seen her in over 5 years. She'd been 13 the last time I remembered her voice. A quiet thing at Thanksgiving, overshadowed by Jordan's commentary and the clatter of forced cheer. Now she stood taller than I expected, hair in tight curls, wearing a university sweatshirt. There was something of Miles in her chin. something of Eleanor in her gaze. "I hope it's okay," she said, fidgeting. "I read about you in the paper, and then Dad mentioned the food truck, and I just wanted to see." I stepped aside. "Come in." She followed me to the porch. I poured 2 glasses of sweet tea, the way Eleanor used to when company dropped by unannounced. Naomi took hers with both hands, grateful. "I'm studying journalism," she said. "I want to write about food, not just reviews, but stories. Family recipes, memories." I smiled. "That's a good way to eat." She looked down at her notebook. "Would you tell me about Sunday stew?" I nodded slowly. "I'll do you one better. I'll show you." We went into the kitchen together, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't cooking alone. Naomi stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, fingers dusted with flour. She moved carefully, like someone trying to respect a sacred space, her eyes flicking to me now and then as if afraid to break the spell. I handed her the wooden spoon. "Now stir it slow. Let it talk to you." She smiled, small and sincere. Grandma used to say that? Almost exactly. Except she'd say, "Let it whisper." She laughed, a clear, bright sound that didn't belong to the girl I vaguely remembered, but to the young woman she'd become. For a moment I saw Eleanor standing behind her, hands on her shoulders, proud and quiet. The kitchen was warm with the smell of tomatoes, garlic, slow-cooked beef. The kind of smell that doesn't just fill the room, it fills memory. Naomi asked questions, her pen scribbling notes between movements. What made Sunday stew different? Why the vinegar? Why thyme, not rosemary? I answered each one not as a teacher, but as someone passing on something weathered and true, not just instructions, lineage. When the stew was simmering, we sat on the porch again. She told me about her campus paper, how she wanted to pitch a column on Southern food history. Not the fancy stuff, she said. Real food. Stories behind it. I nodded. That's what keeps it alive. She sipped her tea and looked at me, gentler now. "Why didn't you ever talk about cooking before?" I leaned back in the chair listening to the cicadas, because no one was listening, or maybe I forgot how to speak. She looked down, ashamed of something that wasn't hers to carry. I wish I'd come sooner. "You came when it mattered," I said, "and you're here now." We didn't talk much after that, just let the air settle, the silence stretch like fresh linen. Sometimes words don't add anything, sometimes presence is enough. That evening, Naomi helped me serve stew to the neighbors. I'd started a tradition, once a month. Free bowls for the block, first come, first served. People brought folding chairs, kids ran barefoot across the lawn. The sky turned lavender while the pot emptied. A woman from across the street, widow like me, brought peach cobbler and 2 spoons. She sat with Naomi and me on the porch afterward, telling stories about her late husband who once fixed everyone's radios for free, even if they weren't broken. Naomi fit right in, asking questions, laughing softly, not observing, belonging. When the sun dipped out of sight, she hugged me tightly. "I'll come next month," she whispered, "if that's okay." "It's more than okay," I said. "It's right." After she left, I cleaned the kitchen alone, but it didn't feel lonely. The bowls clinked with a softer sound. The sponge in my hand wasn't a chore, but a kind of prayer. Gratitude made real. As I dried the last spoon, I caught my reflection in the microwave. The lines on my face hadn't softened, my hair hadn't thickened, but my eyes, they were different, brighter, unhidden. The food was good, the business was growing. But the moment that lingered was Naomi asking to return, not for the stew, for me, for what we were building now. And as I turned off the porch light, I thought, maybe I wasn't just finding myself. Maybe I was becoming a home again. The words sat with me the next morning. Home. Not a place, not just these 4 walls, but a feeling. One that had gone quiet in me for years and now rose softly like a remembered song. Naomi returned the next weekend. She came without pretense, no questions this time, just 2 bags of groceries and a smile that said, "Let's get to work." We peeled sweet potatoes at the counter in comfortable silence, trading glances and old family memories like loose change. While I stirred the glaze, she asked, "Did you always love it? Cooking, I mean." I paused, tasting the edge of cinnamon on the spoon. I think I loved feeding people. The cooking was just how I got there. She nodded. "I get that." Then, as if it was nothing, she said, "Dad's been weird lately. Quiet. I think Jordan's pressing him." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. "I'm not angry with him," I said. "I just see things clearer now." Naomi didn't answer right away. She reached for a bowl, filled it with pecan pieces. "He thinks you're being reckless." "Maybe I am," I said, "but I'm finally driving the car." She smiled again, that soft one I'd begun to love. Sunday's Best was booked for a local music festival that month. 3,000 people expected. Ricky helped tow the trailer out to the lot just after sunrise. I wore my new branded apron. Naomi wore one too. Matching logos, matching purpose. We prepped for hours under a white tent while guitars tuned in the distance. I watched Naomi take orders, make change, ladle stew without hesitation. She was quick, efficient, kind. Eleanor's grace reborn in a generation. The world barely expected to look up from their screens. Just after lunch, while we were working through the biggest line yet, I saw a familiar figure step to the back of the queue. Miles. He wore a ball cap, low over his eyes, hands in his pockets, alone. I said nothing. When he reached the front, Naomi beat me to it. "Hi, Dad," she said, cheerful but firm. "Try the stew." He blinked, caught off guard. "Hey, sweetheart, I didn't realize you were here too. I help out." He looked at me, then the sign, then the long line of people behind him. "I'll have the stew," he said quietly. Naomi served him. He didn't speak again until he'd taken a bite. He paused, chewed, looked up with something unreadable in his eyes. "It's really good, Dad." "I know." He hesitated, then added, "Jordan's not happy. She thinks this is personal." "It's not," I said, "but it's mine. That's enough." He didn't argue, just nodded, eyes downcast. "She thinks Naomi's choosing sides." Naomi folded her arms. "I'm not. I'm showing up where I'm needed." Miles looked at her, startled by the resolve in her voice. "I'm proud of you," he said, almost a whisper. She didn't reply, but I saw her mouth tighten the way Eleanor's used to when holding back tears. He lingered for a few seconds more, then walked off into the crowd, bowl in hand. That night, we sat on the lawn behind the trailer, legs stretched, arms tired. The sky over Tallahassee glowed with festival lights, and people still wandered with spoons in hand, full and smiling. Naomi leaned her head against my shoulder. "I don't care if they get it," she said softly. "I get it." And I realized I didn't need to be understood by everyone. Just one person could be enough. But it was never just one person. That's the lie we tell ourselves to stay safe. What we crave, deep down, is a circle. The following Tuesday, Jordan showed up on my porch. She didn't knock. She stood there with arms crossed and sunglasses pushed high into her hair like a crown, watching me sip my morning coffee on the swing Eleanor once claimed as hers. "I need to talk to you," she said. I motioned to the other chair. "You're always welcome to talk." She didn't sit. "This can't go on." I took a slow sip, letting the air fill with the sound of birds and her impatience. "You'll need to be more specific." "You're encouraging Naomi to go against her parents." I shook my head. "No. I'm showing her she doesn't need permission to stand up straight." "That's the same thing." "No, it's not. I don't ask her for anything. She comes here because she wants to." Jordan's voice got sharper. "You're disrupting our family." I set the mug down. "I think you did that when you mocked what I loved, moved me into your house like I was furniture, and talked over me at every table." Her jaw twitched, but she held her posture. "We took care of you." "You tolerated me," I said, "but I didn't ask to be kept. I asked to belong." She finally sat down, the movement stiff. So this is revenge. No, I said calmly. This is restoration. For the first time, she looked around. At the garden Eleanor once tended, the wind chimes swaying, the table set with a single place. You really think all this makes you some kind of hero? I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just not invisible anymore. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, less angry now, more exposed. I don't understand what changed, she said, quieter. I stopped mistaking silence for peace. She looked down at her hands. Miles is confused. He doesn't know where to stand. He doesn't have to stand anywhere, I said. He can walk beside whoever's still moving forward. Jordan blinked, caught off guard by the softness in my voice. You sound like Eleanor. I should hope so. She didn't speak for a long moment, then quietly. So, this is it? You're cutting us off? I met her eyes. I'm offering a place at the table, but I won't chase anyone to sit. She stood again. Naomi's too young to understand. No, I said. She's just young enough to remember what matters. Jordan left without saying goodbye. The screen door slapped shut behind her like punctuation. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad. I felt done. And that evening, Naomi texted me 2 words, I heard. I wrote back, still cooking. She replied with a spoon emoji and a heart. That weekend I went to the fairgrounds early and laid out a new sign Naomi had helped me paint. Sunday's best. Southern food, old soul, new roots. A woman I didn't recognize came up around noon. Late 30s, businesslike. She handed me a card. I run a community kitchen downtown. We're building a culinary training program for seniors and veterans. We'd love your help. I stared at the card. Why me? Because people trust you, she said, and because you're building something people want to belong to. I told her I'd think about it. Later that night, I walked through the house with the lights off. Each room held a different memory, a fight, a laugh, the smell of Sunday gravy, the echo of Eleanor's humming. I wasn't haunted anymore. I was anchored, and when you're anchored, you stop drifting toward what used to hold you. The call came the Tuesday around 3 in the afternoon. I was prepping onions when Miles's name lit up the screen. I wiped my hands, answered. His voice was low. Dad, can we talk? Always. I'm outside. I opened the door and there he stood, not with confrontation in his stance, but something closer to apology. He looked older than last time. Not in years, but in the slump of his shoulders, the wornness behind his eyes. He stepped in and glanced around. The kitchen was warm with broth and the last of the rosemary biscuits. Naomi's notes were still scattered across the table. A dish towel hung over the back of a chair. I almost didn't come, he said, but you did. He sat across from me, elbows on knees. Jordan wants me to give you an ultimatum. I didn't speak. She thinks if we pull Naomi back, you'll stop this whole thing, that you'll reset. I reached for a biscuit and tore it gently in 2, and what do you think? He stared at the floor for a long while. I think I've been hiding behind her for years, letting her speak for us, letting her be the bad guy so I didn't have to choose. That's still a choice, I said softly. He nodded. I know. The air between us was heavy with everything unsaid, the fights we didn't have, the visits that ended too early, the silences that used to feel safe but now just felt hollow. She said, I need to ask you to stop seeing Naomi. I looked at him, full and steady. No. He blinked. I won't stop loving her. I won't stop feeding her. And I sure as hell won't stop showing her what it looks like to live on your own terms. He swallowed hard. Even if it costs you everything. It already did, Miles. I already lost my place in your home, your respect, your family dinners. I've paid that price. What I'm doing now is building something from the ashes. He rubbed his temples. She's threatening to cut off contact. She says Naomi's under our roof, under our rules. I leaned forward. Naomi's grown. She'll make her own choice. You can't use her like currency. He looked up, eyes wet. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I believe you, I said, but meaning and doing are different beasts. He stood slowly, walked to the window. She won't forgive me. Maybe not, I said, but I already have. He turned. Why? Because I see you, son, underneath all of it. I see the boy who helped me plant tomatoes when he was 6, the man who sat beside me at Eleanor's funeral, holding my hand too tight. That man's still in there. He just needs to find his voice again. He nodded, once, then turned and left without another word. I stood there for a long time, hands still, breath even. He came looking to control the story, but I'd already rewritten mine. Later that evening, Naomi sent a photo of a handwritten recipe card. Eleanor's peach glaze, copied in her own cursive. Underneath, Naomi had written, "Let's try this Saturday?" I smiled. I texted back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Because now I knew what mattered. Not permission, not approval, but presence. And presence, I found, has a way of pulling others in, like warmth does on a cold porch. The Saturday Naomi came over with that recipe card, we worked in a rhythm so easy it felt inherited. I watched her peel peaches with the same slow care Eleanor had once used. She tucked stray curls behind her ear with a flour-dusted hand, humming some tune I didn't recognize but loved immediately. She called it a test batch. I called it church. We ended up with 3 jars of glaze, a kitchen that smelled like memory, and a new item for Sunday's best. Pork belly sliders with peach glaze and collared slaw. By the following weekend, they sold out in 20 minutes. That afternoon, while cleaning up, a man approached the trailer, slightly older than Naomi, tall, sun-creased, with a sleeve tattoo that peeked from his rolled shirt. He stood back a little awkwardly, then smiled when I caught his eye. "You, Gerald?" "That's me." He offered a hand. "Theo." "I run the coffee stand 2 rows down." "Ah," I said, shaking. "The guy with the espresso that tastes like jazz." He laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." Naomi came up behind me and gave a friendly wave. "Theo's the one who gave me that peach cobbler muffin last week," she said. "Careful," I warned. "She'll trade family secrets for good pastry." He laughed again, softer this time. "She mentioned you were looking for a small batch roaster for your brunch menu. I do a honey blend. Figured I'd offer a few samples. No strings." I looked him over, took in the casual ease, the kindness behind the eyes. He reminded me of someone Eleanor would have liked, someone unbothered by surface things. "I'll taste what you've got," I said, "but only if you try the sliders next time." He grinned. "Deal." The next few weeks blurred with small changes that felt like big steps. We added 2 more market days. Naomi helped me build a simple website, and Theo kept showing up, first with samples, then with conversation, and eventually, one Thursday, with folding chairs and 2 coffees. We sat in the quiet lull between crowds and talked about flavor, about grief, about Tallahassee in August. He listened like it mattered. He didn't try to solve anything. Just sipped and nodded and sat with me in the moment. Naomi watched us from the counter, that same small smile tugging at her mouth. Later that evening, after the trailer was packed up, she nudged me with an elbow. "You like him?" I didn't deny it. She said, "Eleanor would have too." I looked at her. "You think?" She liked people who didn't rush things, who saw the quiet. I nodded. She did. Naomi slipped her arm through mine. "So do you." I didn't know where it was going. That wasn't the point. Theo never asked about my past, never commented on the newspaper articles or the stories people told about the food truck that came out of nowhere. He just brought coffee, offered kindness, and stayed when most would have left. One evening, after we'd finished cleanup, he lingered a little longer. "You ever think about hosting a supper club?" he asked. "Not fancy, just folks. Food. Music. Porch lights." I looked around my little lot, the way the dusk wrapped itself around the trailer, the tables, the people still chatting nearby. "I think about it now." He smiled. "Let me know when you're ready." That night, Naomi stayed late. We watched an old cooking show on the porch, plates on our laps, laughter spilling like gravy. And I realized I hadn't just built a business. I'd built a table. And after months of folding chairs and borrowed corners, it was time to build a roof over that table. The lot I'd been renting next to the library came up for sale, half gravel, half weeds. Nothing special to someone else, but to me it looked like a promise, a place I could shape, anchor roots, not just memories. I bought it with the last of my savings and a small business grant Mabel helped me apply for. Theo helped me sketch the layout, kitchen trailer tucked under a tin awning, a few wooden picnic tables shaded by sailcloth, Edison bulbs strung from pole to pole like twinkling breadcrumbs. Naomi painted the sign herself. Sunday's Best Cafe. Come sit a spell. We held the soft opening on a Thursday evening. Theo brewed sweet coffee and passed it around in mismatched mugs. Naomi brought her college friends, and even the widow from down the block brought chess pie and folding fans. I wore my original apron, frayed at the hem, proud as any man could be. It wasn't a grand building, but it was honest. Open to the sky, it breathed, and it was mine. As the crowd settled in, I caught sight of Miles standing near the corner, uncertain. No Jordan, just him, holding a plate of sliders, watching Naomi laugh with her friends like he was trying to learn a language he once knew. I walked over. "Didn't expect you," I said. He looked up, startled but not cold. "I almost didn't come. Yet here you are." He took a breath. "Jordan moved out. Said she needed space." "I don't blame her," I nodded. "That's a hard thing to admit." He looked down at the plate. "I read the article Naomi published. About you, the food, Mom's recipe box. I didn't know she remembered that much. She paid attention, more than we gave her credit for." "I was wrong about a lot," he said. "About you, about what mattered." I let the silence linger. Sometimes truth needs room. "I want to be around," he said finally, "if that's all right." I gestured to the tables. "Grab a seat. There's plenty." He walked toward Naomi, tentative, then took the spot beside her. She blinked in surprise, then smiled. Not wide, but real. Later, Theo passed me a mug of coffee and nudged his head toward the tables. "Looks like a beginning." "No," I said. "Looks like a continuation." We sat on the porch I'd built beside the trailer. The wood still smelled like pine. The sky overhead turned dusky pink, the lights casting a warm hush over the yard, the kind of scene Eleanor would have painted in her mind while humming to herself over a simmering pot. I thought of her then, of the house we shared, of the years between grief and rediscovery, of the long road through silence, misunderstanding, and finally, this. Theo rested his arm along the back of the bench. Comfortable, steady. "You ever miss the way it was?" he asked. "Sometimes," I said, "but I wouldn't trade this." "What is this exactly?" I watched Naomi tap her glass with a spoon and stand to thank the crowd. Her voice, clear and certain, carried across the tables. "This," I said, "is what healing looks like." The crowd clapped. A breeze passed through the lot, lifting the corner of the tablecloth. Laughter broke out near the coffee stand, and I knew in that quiet, firm way that only comes after long years of doubt. I'd arrived. But arrival wasn't an ending. It was a steadying, a pause in the current, a breath after the climb. The days moved slower now, not because I had less to do, but because I no longer rushed through them. Mornings began with quiet, coffee brewed soft, the back door opened to breeze and birdsong. Naomi came by twice a week. Theo came by nearly every day. Sometimes we didn't even talk. We just shared space, a crossword, a sandwich, a sunset. The cafe had grown, but not too fast, just enough to feel like community. People left notes under the napkin holders, thank yous, recipes, memories. One woman left a black and white photo of her grandmother making cornbread. Another gave me a stained recipe card in shaky cursive titled Ham Hock Heaven. I kept every single one. One Sunday evening, after the last customer left and the chairs were stacked, Naomi sat across from me at the picnic table, elbows propped up. "I think I'm staying here after graduation," she said. "Freelancing, maybe helping you expand." "You sure?" I asked. "There's a big world out there," she shrugged. "There's a big heart right here." She reached into her tote and handed me something wrapped in brown paper. I opened it slowly. A framed print of Eleanor's handwritten recipe for Sunday stew, scanned from the original. At the bottom, Naomi had written, "Rooted doesn't mean stuck." I traced the ink with my thumb. "She would have been proud of you." Naomi leaned her head against my shoulder. "Only because you showed me how." We sat like that until the light faded. That week, Theo invited me to a poetry reading downtown. I almost said no. Too busy, too tired, too unfamiliar. But I went, and I watched him listen, his whole body stilled in attention, like he did with me, like he did with everyone who dared to speak. On the walk back, he said, "You ever think about writing a book?" I chuckled. "About what?" He looked at me with that calm certainty. "About this. Food, grief, joy. Not a cookbook, a memoir with flavors." I didn't answer, not right then. But later that night, I pulled out Eleanor's old notebook, the one she used to write down things that weren't recipes, quotes, grocery lists, little thoughts. On the first page, in faded ink, it said, "A home is not built by walls. It's built by welcome." I started writing the next morning. The cafe's anniversary fell on a warm spring evening. We strung up more lights. Naomi brought out her camera. Theo brought lemon shortbread. Miles came too, this time with a plate of his own, no hesitation. He helped me clean up. Didn't speak much. Just clapped my back once and said, "Good work, Dad." It was enough. When the evening wound down, I sat on the porch, the news sign glowing faintly in the background. Sunday's best cafe. Come sit a spell. Theo joined me. He held my hand without asking. No words passed between us. The night held us gently, and I thought about all the kitchens I'd ever stood in, the quiet ones, the noisy ones, the ones where I felt invisible, and now, this one under the stars, where I had become something whole again. Not because I won, not because I proved anything, but because I endured, and in enduring, I found myself again, free-rooted, alive.